The image of the Pope is one of divine authority, the living representative of Christ on earth, draped in white, crowned with the triple tiara, standing atop the Vatican as the spiritual shepherd of over 1 billion souls. But behind this facade of holiness lies a shadowed history, a legacy of lust, mistresses, hidden children, and political entanglements tangled in the bedsheets of Rome. In the medieval and Renaissance era, becoming pope was not always the result of divine calling, but political maneuvering. Families like the Borgias and Medicis twisted the sacred institution into their own playground of power and desire. The papacy wasn't immune to the temptations of the flesh. In fact, some popes were notorious for their insatiable appetites. Perhaps no figure better embodies this dichotomy than Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, a man whose reign as pope was marked not by spiritual revival, but by orgies in the Vatican, secret mistresses, and even accusations of incest. He kept multiple lovers, the most infamous being Venanza dei Catanii and Giulia Farnese, women of beauty, influence, and danger. Alexander VI's court became infamous across Europe. Eyewitnesses whispered of the banquet of chestnuts, a night of forbidden games, where naked women danced for the Pope and his sons under candlelight, while coins were thrown to see who could perform the most indecent acts. The lines between power and pleasure had been erased. Yet, despite the public scandal, these popes maintained power, protected by family, fear, and control over the Holy Word. Some even legitimized their children. For Alexander VI, his son Cesare Borgia became a cardinal at age 15. His daughter Lucrezia, rumored to be more than just a daughter. The sins of the throne were not just private, they changed history. Alliances were broken, wars were ignited, and the Church's moral foundation cracked. How can the spiritual shepherds of Christ commit acts worthy of the Roman emperors they once condemned? She was known as Julia la Bella, Julia the Beautiful, with hair like gold thread, eyes the color of sacred wine, and a body that seemed carved by angels but desired by devils. Giulia Farnese was more than just a mistress. She was a symbol of both blasphemy and power. And at just 17, she became the lover of the most powerful man on earth, the Pope. She wasn't supposed to be remembered. Giulia was married to Orsino Orsini, a nobleman of convenience. But she belonged to Pope Alexander VI. Whispers spread that her presence at the Vatican was not only accepted but celebrated. Cardinals bowed to her. Bishops feared her. And behind the throne, she often sat, unseen, but never unfelt. The irony? She was also depicted in religious art as the Virgin Mary. Yes, the Pope's mistress was used as the model for the Mother of Christ. Julia's face adorned frescoes and altarpieces across Rome. Sacred and sinful in the same breath. Julia was no fool. She used her beauty like a sword. Letters between her and Alexander VI reveal not only affection, but strategy. She persuaded him on papal appointments, land disputes, and war decisions. When Rome thought she was just a pretty face, she was redrawing the borders of kingdoms. But power has a cost. Julia's influence earned her enemies. Some called her the whore of Babylon. Others accused her of witchcraft. She was blamed for the Pope's worst excesses. Rumors spread that she performed dark rites under St. Peter's Basilica. Truth or propaganda? No one dared ask aloud. And then, the silence. As Alexander VI aged, his political enemies grew bolder. When he died, possibly poisoned, Julia was cast out of Vatican circles. But she didn't vanish. She returned to the Farnese estate with land, wealth, and stories too dangerous to write down. To this day, her legacy haunts the Holy City. Her portraits still hang. Her name, rarely spoken, but in every secret Vatican record, behind every power-hungry pope, there is the shadow of a woman like Julia, beautiful, dangerous, and more powerful than any cardinal dares admit. Popes were meant to be celibate. They were the earthly vicar of Christ, chosen to renounce the pleasures of the flesh. But behind the Vatican walls, many popes fathered children, sometimes in secret, sometimes in defiance. These children were born of sin and raised in gold. No name strikes harder than Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI. He was not hidden. He was paraded. A cardinal at 18, a general at 20, a seducer at any age. Alexander VI did not deny his bastard. He crowned him. Cesare was both prince and priest. He led armies into battle, killed rivals in the name of peace, and seduced noble women with a smile forged in hell. Machiavelli admired him. Rome feared him. He was the Pope's blade, and perhaps his punishment. But Cesare wasn't the only one. Many popes had secret families. Pope Paul III openly acknowledged his children and even named his grandson a cardinal at the age of 14. Nepotism wasn't a sin in the Vatican. It was policy. Some children were never claimed. Born in convents, abandoned in country villas, or passed off as nephews and nieces. But blood does not lie. Their features betrayed them, the same eyes, the same mouth, the same ambition. They became whispers in the Vatican, figli di Satana travestiti de santi, sons of Satan dressed as saints. The Church called it unofficial succession. Bloodlines were preserved under false names. Land was transferred, titles granted. Even when popes died, their children ruled from behind altars and thrones. They didn't need to wear the tiara, they owned the men who did. And then, there were the tragic ones. Children caught in the politics of faith. Some were assassinated by enemies of the Church. Others poisoned to erase scandal. A few lived, forever imprisoned in monasteries. No matter how sacred the father, the sin always found the child. The Vatican never admitted these children officially, but their blood runs through Europe's nobility. To this day, there are families whose lineage leads not just to kings, but to popes. The holy bloodline was never as pure as they claimed. It is said that the Pope lives alone, but in the shadows of the apostolic palace, history tells a different story. There were women, dozens. Some were maids, others were mistresses. A few were artists, and all were silenced. The Vatican had its own harem, and no one was supposed to know. Pope Leo X, of the Medici family, was known for his extravagance. Behind closed doors, he surrounded himself not just with scholars and musicians, but with beautiful women dressed as angels for inspiration. Some were painted, some were touched, all were chosen. Then came Pope Julius III, who elevated a young street boy named Innocenzo to cardinal. They met when the boy served wine at a party. He was 14. Soon, Innocenzo shared the Pope's table, the Pope's power, and the Pope's bed. The whispers never stopped. Not all popes had lovers, but those who did not hide them well. Vatican servants were often ex-prostitutes, dancers, or the widows of noblemen, women with secrets and nothing to lose. One pope demanded silence. Another offered silk and pearls for loyalty. There were secret staircases, rooms with no windows, and contracts signed in blood. The Church called them household help, but their names never appeared in any official record. Sometimes, these women held influence. They whispered in the Pope's ear. They advised diplomacy, revenge, or pleasure. Some became the real rulers, saints in public, sirens in private. They weren't just used. They played the game, too. But there were tragedies. Many were sent away, pregnant, disgraced, or silenced. Some took their own lives. Others vanished into convents or tombs without names. Their faces erased, their voices lost, their bodies buried in sacred soil. Today, Vatican tours speak of saints, miracles, and relics. But they do not speak of the women. They were real. They lived, they bled, they loved, and they were forgotten. The harem of the Holy See still echoes in silence. They told the world that celibacy was holy. That desire was the devil's whisper. That a pure heart required an untouched body. But behind the marble doors of the Vatican, desire ruled, and the devil took notes. History remembers Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, as one of the most corrupt men to ever sit on the throne of St. Peter. He fathered at least 7 children, while preaching purity. He threw orgies in the Vatican, banquets where the naked danced among cardinals. And still, he claimed divine authority. The Church condemned adultery, but popes blessed their own secret weddings. The Church condemned homosexuality, but letters remain, hidden in the Vatican archives, of popes writing love poems to young men in confessionals. They built cathedrals with money from indulgences, spiritual bribes sold to cleanse sins. But the real sins were inside those very walls. Servants raped, children disappeared, and silence was bought with gold and holy water. Popes were men, with mortal hunger and immortal power. They used the language of God to justify the actions of demons. Every mistress silenced, every bastard child hidden, every altar desecrated, became part of a system wrapped in incense and lies. And yet, they were adored. Millions still kiss the ring, still bow, still believe, because power dressed in gold always looks like heaven. Today, the Vatican is cleaner, but the sins echo. The secret passageways still exist. The hidden archives still locked. They don't burn mistresses anymore. They bury stories. Not in judgment, but in remembrance. The popes were human, but they sold holiness. And their sins, buried in marble and myth, still shape the power we worship today. This was no throne of saints. This was a palace of sin.